assuming you make an independent film, and assuming in the best case scenario, it's something that a distributor wants to distribute, you will not be able to get any distribution in the United States unless you're able to purchase E&O insurance. E&O insurance stands for errors and omissions insurance. You will be able to get some distribution for your film abroad because in a lot of other societies, they're not quite as litigious as we are here in the United States. And a lot of money, actually, for independent films comes from abroad. But if you hope to have your film shown in the theater, in your hometown, or shown on Netflix in the USA, you will need to get this insurance because virtually no distributor of any stature will distribute your film if you don't have E&O insurance. And E&O insurance essentially is malpractice insurance for filmmakers. If a filmmaker fails to get all the releases or secures all the rights to their film, perhaps they didn't get a license for a piece of music on the soundtrack, perhaps they didn't get a release, or didn't acquire the rights to the script if it's a narrative film. The insurance is what protects the broadcaster and the distributor. And if there's copyright infringement, everyone in the chain of distribution is potentially liable. So it's no excuse for the broadcaster to say, well, we didn't know that the film that we acquired to show on ABC, that the filmmaker didn't have all the rights. It's not an excuse. They're still liable for a copyright infringement. Maybe they're an innocent infringer and the damages are less, but they can still be liable. And someone whose rights are infringed could go to court and potentially get an injunction to stop distribution of the program. So in order to get E&O insurance, you have to fill out a complicated form. And it asks all kinds of questions because the insurance company, they want your premium dollar, but they don't really want to take any more risk than they have to. And they're going to want to know that you have been diligent in getting all the necessary releases. And they're going to ask on that questionnaire, who's your entertainment attorney? They're going to ask, all kinds of stuff. And if you can't document that you have all the rights in writing, you're going to have a problem. And so sometimes filmmakers, they make a film, and then the film, gets some acclaim, and someone wants to distribute it, but they fail to get a release, for instance, from one of the actors. And now they can't find the actor because, actors, they move around. And that could stop you from getting distribution of your film. So you need And a lot of filmmakers have a idealized view of what goes on at these markets. And that's why I encourage them to go to some place like AFM and see what it's like. And some of them are really shocked and appalled when they see that AFM is more like a fish market than an art gallery. Because it is. It's more like a fish market than an art gallery. AFM lasts about 10 days. And you have these buyers from throughout the world. They descend upon Santa Monica. And it's the same thing at Cannes and Berlin and other places. And, it's like supermarket sweepstakes for the sales agent. They have 10 days to buy the license, let's say 200 films, to license the rights to show the film in their home country. Okay? So imagine, you don't have enough time to sit and necessarily watch even all the films. A lot of times, and you have maybe 2,000 films to choose from, 2,000 new films to choose from over 200 different sellers at AFM. And you're going around, careening around the corridors of the AFM with your shopping cart, and maybe the first stop is the Weinstein Company, and then a couple other of the bigger companies, and then you have another 50 films you need to acquire, and you look at all these sales agents, and they're all selling films that don't have really big stars in it, or no one back in your home country knows anything about. And if one of the sales agents is asking too big a price, you just say, oh, I'll just go next door. There's hundreds of sales agents here selling similar product, and it's to some extent a buyer's market. There's a lot of films being made, and there's relatively few that the buyers want, and so they have a lot of leverage, and the prices have been going down. 15 years ago, clients of mine made low-budget independent films for less than $1 million, and we would often get a license fee from Germany of $400,000 or $500,000 just for German rights. Right? Today, that same film of equal quality, be lucky to get $100,000, $125,000. The prices have gone down. That's the great thing about the movie business. The movie business is inherently democratic. It's inherently democratic because the established players have never been able to corner the market on the essential commodity that you're selling. And that essential commodity that you're selling is a good story, okay? It's creativity, okay? And there's no guarantee that the powers that be, the most famous directors, the most famous writers, that these people are going to come up with the next story that resonates widely in audiences. There's no guarantee. And in fact, in many times, it's just the opposite. My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Here's a movie that cost $5 million to make. And the person who funded it is a guy who made his fortune in the computer business. I think his name is Norm Wyatt. He made his fortune with Gateway Computers. And he financed it, and they did a deal with HBO. HBO put up half the budget, half the $5 million budget, probably as a favor to Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks' wife, Rita Wilson, was a fan of this stage play, and probably HBO thought they were doing Tom Hanks a favor. Turned out they did themselves a big favor because they got the domestic rights for a pittance for a film that became a huge hit. Well, when this movie was finished, they shopped it to all the distributors, and the distributors looked at it and they said, oh, you know, the Greek-American community is just not that big. We just don't think it has much potential. And they all passed on it. So they hired, you know, an independent guy, Bob Burney, who went out and distributed it and booked it into theaters, and it became a huge hit. And there were lines down the street at theaters that were showing My Big Fat Greek Wedding. When the Paramount mega movie next door in the next theater was empty, because people don't care. People care about a good story. I mean, when people go to see a movie, they don't go in there and they care about what the budget is, right? I mean, when you go in to see a movie, you don't look up at the screen and look at the budget. You know, the budget doesn't matter. And you pay the same ticket price whether it's an independent film or a major studio film. What you care about is the story. And you probably don't even know who the distributor is. If I asked you what's your favorite movie and who distributed it, most of you probably wouldn't remember, because what does it matter whether it was distributed by MGM or Paramount or Warner Brothers? It doesn't matter to most people. Okay, it's not like when you buy sneakers. When you buy sneakers, maybe you want Nike sneakers or you want Reebok sneakers or you want a certain brand of sneakers. When you go to movies, all you care about is the story. And increasingly what you care about is what your friends tell you about the movie. Okay? Independent films especially rely upon good word of mouth. And nowadays, word of mouth spreads incredibly quickly. With the internet and instant messaging, people go to movies on a Thursday night, and you know, by Sunday, everyone knows, if not before, whether it's good or not. And the word gets around. And if you have a little movie and you can get it out there and people really like it, the word spreads, the lines materialize at the box office, and at the same time, people avoid the bigger budget films because they just don't care. And no one has been able to accurately predict which stories will resonate with audiences, you know. And if you look at, what's interesting to look at is every year to look at, Variety puts out a report in January of the previous year's movies, and they list all the movies by each studio. And you might look at, let's say, Warner Brothers, and you might see they put out 20 different movies. And you look at them, and there's a couple of names you immediately recognize, you know, Harry Potter and this one and that one that were well publicized, very successful films. And there's other films you look at and you say, I don't remember that one. And the reason you don't remember that one is that they opened it in Seattle for one weekend to market test it, and it did terribly, and then it went straight to video, and it didn't get much distribution. And all the major studios, if you look at their revenue and where it comes from a handful of pictures. Maybe about 3 dozen do about $50 million a year. Maybe 15 to 20 do $100 million, which is considered what's a blockbuster hit. But they're putting out 450, 500 movies a year. So most of the time they're getting up at bat. Even the major studios, they're getting up at bat, and they're hitting a single or double, or they're striking out. They're not hitting a home run. Most movies are not that successful, because even though they have the top writers and the top directors, they can't, you know, for some reason, you know, the story just doesn't resonate with the audiences. And nowadays, it's even tougher to figure out what audiences want. I mean, we can't even predict accurately what American moviegoers want to see. And nowadays, 2/3 of the revenue comes in from abroad. It used to be 50-50. The world was 50% North America, 50% the rest of the world. Now it's 2/3 the rest of the world, 1/3 the United States. Why are festivals important? A couple of reasons. First of all, festivals aren't important for all films. If you make an action adventure story, you know, it's probably not going to get in any festivals because it's not really festival fare. Although they make exceptions. Cannes Film Festival, they always show a couple of American, big studio pictures. Why do they show them? Why would they show them at the Cannes Film Festival, which is in? They want the stars to come, right. They want to get some people on that red carpet, and the only way you're going to get Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman or this one or that one there is if you agree to show their movie and it's at a competition, and it's basically because they want to attract a bunch of stars because they want to add to the glamour. And you got all the photographers there, and they don't want to take pictures of just grungy filmmakers in their blue jeans. They want some stars. So they'll show some of those, but they're not in competition. But by and large, most festivals, they are, there's exceptions. Horror films generally don't do well in the festival circuit, but some of them have midnight screenings and they show them. And there are some festivals like Screamfest, that's all they show is horror films, So, but by and large, most festivals tend to be invested in the art of filmmaking and aesthetics, and they tend to try to get films that festival goers will like. And festival goers are not representative of the population. And most of the people who go to film festivals are better educated, wealthier, more cosmopolitan than your average, beer guzzling moviegoer who wants to buy a box of bullets with that DVD. So they're hardly a representative sample of the whole country. But when you show a film at a film festival, most of the people in the audience are not distributors. Most of them are people who bought a ticket. And you do get some sense of how your movie will play and whether the story resonates with moviegoers. Granted, it's a slice of the movie-going public that tends to be smarter, wealthier, and better educated than a lot of moviegoers, but it still gives you some sense. So festivals are different than markets, and this can be confusing to people because some festivals run alongside markets. The Cannes Film Festival, there's two events going on. There's the marché, the market, and there's the festival. The festival is showing new films. In fact, the festival is not really under one roof. There's different sections of the festival, like Directors Fortnight, which is essentially run by the French equivalent of the Directors Guild. And then there's Critics Week, which is run by film critics. It's not really part of the official festival. So, and then there's the market. And the films in the market are just basically films that some sales agent is representing. They're not showing in the festival at all. And this is all going on side by side. Berlin has a market. It's more of an art house market. AFM has a market. It doesn't really have a festival, but they have an affiliation now with the AFI festival, but I don't think it does much good because I don't think people, after watching films all day at the AFM near the beach, are going to fight traffic for an hour to go to see the AFI films across town. After it doesn't make any sense to me, but so film markets are generally only open to the trade. In other words, if you're not in the film industry, you can't just come in and buy a ticket. Okay, festivals, you can buy a ticket. Now, some festivals like Sundance, it's hard to buy a ticket if you don't buy a pass, and because there's such demand. You may not be able to buy a ticket because before it sells out. But theoretically, you can buy a ticket. And you can show up at Sundance, and often it's not that difficult at Sundance to get to see some of the foreign films and the world films, but the dramatic competition, the documentary competition films, that could be difficult if you don't have a pass to buy an individual ticket, simply because it may be sold out. But it's open to the public, festivals. Markets are generally not open to the public. The reason you go to festivals is to get publicity for your film. You go there because when you go to Sundance, you see that there's hundreds of journalists from throughout the country who have been sent there by their newspapers, their media, their TV stations. They're there to report. And you know what? If they don't file some reports, if they don't write some reviews and don't put in some stories, next year they won't get to go back. And they like to go to Sundance. They have a good time there. They go to parties, they see films. It's a good deal, especially if their boss is paying for it all, right? So believe me, those reviewers, those media people, they are there and they are going to write a bunch of stuff. and there's a whole bunch of filmmakers there. And Sundance is the one festival it's really, I think, important to have a publicist. Some of the other festivals, not so important. But you need someone there who can be a wrangler, and for all the media. Because a lot of filmmakers, they don't know how to deal with the media. Someone has to schedule all these interviews and service the media. They may want still pictures, they may want different things if they're going to write a story about you. So the reason you go to the festivals is to build awareness for your film. And if you get into Sundance, even if you don't win an award, just getting into Sundance is a distinction by itself. And if you get the subject of a bunch of newspaper reviews and they're positive reviews, that can be very helpful. And when you go to a distributor, if you have that ammunition, if you built up that ammunition, your film is much more desirable in their eyes. So I've talked to distributors and they've said to me, we like the film, but put it in the festival circuit and let's see what happens. And if it gets some good reviews, then we'll take it on. What they're saying is, look, just selling the film by itself is hard. But if you give me a film and it wins an award at Sundance and I have a great review from the New York Times and the LA Times and Vanity Fair, and I can put that on the poster, it's much easier for me to sell the film. Because I got to convince people to get in their cars and come and see the movie. And if all I can say is it's a good film, that doesn't go very far. I need some third-party validation. I need some critics. I need some news media. And I'm talking about the major news media. I'm not talking about, the Podunk, Times gave you a great review. I'm talking about the major media. If they give you a great review, if you win an award, then that makes the film more marketable. It makes people. And part of the problem with film deals is that they're very risky. Investing in the film is very risky. And if you're asking someone to put up $1 million to finance, a film, they could lose it all. Films are probably about the riskiest investment out there. I mean, if you invested in real estate, for instance, and you were foolish enough not to buy any kind of fire insurance, and your building burned down, it's not 100% loss because you still have the land that the building is on, right? But if you make a movie and no one wants to distribute it and no one wants to see it, it is 100% loss. I mean, the salvage value of the celluloid, assuming you shot it on celluloid, is almost nothing. So it can be 100% write-off. And so it's an extremely risky investments compared to other investments. So title. And chain of title are all the documents that evidence that you have all the rights to a film. And a film is made up of different component parts. It includes the music, it includes the footage. You need to have work for hire agreements with everyone on your crew who made a creative contribution, like the writer, the editor, the set designer. All these people, you need to have a contract. It can be pretty brief, but it should have a clause in it that's called a work for hire clause that basically vests their contribution in the film to you, the producer, the production company, and you own the copyright. Because otherwise, you don't own the copyright. And it doesn't matter that you paid them, that you have a check that you paid them. That's not evidence that it's a work for hire. Okay? So a work for hire under copyright law falls into two situations for films. One is if an employee of yours creates work within the scope of employment, then it's a work for hire. And the other situation is if the person is hired as an independent contractor, they're not an employee, there needs to be a written agreement signed by them before they commence work, vesting the copyright in you with this work for hire clause. So it's best to get this in writing and make sure you have good chain of title. Otherwise, you may be in a situation where you have a great film and all kinds of people want to distribute it, and if you don't have the paperwork, the deal will fall through. So with home video deals, we tend to have three different types of deals. Not all the deals fall neatly in one of these categories, but these are the three types of deals. The first is what I would call a standard deal, where the home video label takes a distribution fee and expenses, and the balance goes to the filmmaker. I once had a filmmaker who called me up. I think he was from Portland, Oregon, and his film was licensed to HBO, and it did very well, and it was a big license fee, and he couldn't understand why he wasn't seeing any money. And so I said, well, send me the contract. And I looked at the contract, and the contract allowed the distributor to take a huge distribution fee, no cap on expenses, you know, and then what was left was split 50-50. And I said, this is a crazy deal. This is a crazy deal, you know. And of course, you know, you're not going to see any money if you make a deal like this. And there's no lawsuit there because it's an unfair deal, but he made the deal. And he said, well, they told me this was their standard deal. And I said, yeah, it's their standard deal where they try to keep all the money in their pockets. But, you know, you should have asked around. This is not the standard deal for people who are savvy. So the second type of home video deal was what we call a 50-50 net deal. Expenses off the top and then a 50% split. In other words, the out-of-pocket expenses for marketing and distribution come off the top. The distributor does not take a distribution fee, but they take 50% of what's left. The other 50% goes to the producer, the filmmaker. And the third type of deal is the royalty deal, where you might get 20 to 25% of the wholesale price. Okay? The wholesale price generally is about half the retail price. So the retail price might be $20 for a DVD. The wholesale price would be $10. Walmart doesn't pay $10. They have the clout. They often pay around $6 but they buy a lot. They don't buy 3 and, you know, that's it. Okay, so which is the best deal? Which is the best deal? People ask me all the time, which is the best deal? And my answer is, it depends. Termination clause. If the other party defaults, you know, you want to be able to get your film back. A lot of foreign sales agents often will present a filmmaker with a contract that's 25 years, or, I mean, I've seen sometimes it's like in perpetuity. I mean, it's ridiculous. And this is a film that the distributor, the sales agent, didn't finance, didn't develop, didn't produce. It's just distributing. And they're going to get a commission, often 20%, and get reimbursement of some of their expenses, which hopefully you've capped. And you know, they're helping you sell your film. Now, a good sales agent is invaluable for a filmmaker because most filmmakers, if they want to self-distribute their film on the international marketplace, they don't have the skills and the knowledge to do so successfully. How many filmmakers know who the buyers in Turkey are? How many know what's a reasonable price to ask for from Turkey? How many want to be bothered with fulfilling these orders from around the world? I mean, sales agents not only sell the films, they service these deals. When you license a film to a buyer in Turkey, you have to send them, you know, copies of the film or arrange for it to be sent to them, copies of the stills, the still photographs, the artwork, you know, various documents. Someone has to do this, and most sales agents have 1 or 2 or more people whose full-time job is just servicing their buyers and sending them this stuff, something that most filmmakers don't particularly want to do. And so most filmmakers are not really well situated to license their film around the world. I recently spoke to a filmmaker who's planning to go to AFM in the fall and to sell their film themselves. Right? They're not going to rent a booth, which actually at AFM is a hotel room within the Lowe's Hotel, and set up an office there. They're just going to walk the halls and they're going to hope to bump into people and sell the film. And I told them, you know, I don't think that's going to be successful. First of all, you have to understand that the buyers don't want to buy directly from filmmakers. They're afraid. They're afraid, especially if you make a customary deal where they have to send you 100% of the license fee before they get the film. They're afraid they're going to give some filmmaker out in Topeka, Kansas, 100% of the license fee, and then when the film arrives, it's defective. And what are they going to do now, right? Go after that filmmaker? They want to generally deal with the sales agents they have a long-term relationship with, the sales agents they do business with on a regular basis, the sales agents who value that relationship and they see it every market, you know, several times a year. And if the film is a problem, will make good on it because they don't want to lose that customer. And so, you know, you're the filmmaker from Topeka, Kansas, and you're offering a great deal to the buyer from Bulgaria at maybe half the price they could get from a sales agent. They still don't want to do the deal Okay, they want to do it through a sales agent. They want to do it through a company they have a relationship with, they see on a regular basis, who they have confidence in that they will get something with the materials, have past quality control, and are exhibitable. And a lot of them have been burned. So termination clause, you want to be able, first of all, you want to try to keep the contract short. If you've financed the film, raised the money to make the film, and produced the film, and now you're entering into a deal with a distributor, you've created the asset, and there's no particular reason you need to give it to them for a long period of time. Because what often happens is, if you enter into a 10 or 20 year deal, the first couple of years, the sales agent is very active in trying to sell it and maybe even does some business on it. And then it just sort of sits there, and the filmmaker wants to get the rights back, wants to do other things with it. There's maybe new media that's come about. Maybe then I want to license it, put it up on YouTube, and they can't. It's their film, but they entered into this exclusive relationship for a long term. So it's best to keep it shorter. What I like to do on these deals is have a deal where the initial term is short, 2 or 3 years, but there's milestones in the contract. And if these performance milestones are met, there's an automatic extension. So distributors or sales agent will say, look, we're putting up money here. Not only are we perhaps giving you an advance or a minimum guarantee of money that you're going to receive, but we're also putting up money to market your film. We're going to the Cannes Film Festival. You go to the Cannes Film Festival as a sales agent, you're looking at spending at least $90,000. You have to fly your people over there. You have to put them up in hotels. You have to pay a market fee to be in the market there. It's expensive. You go to Cannes, you want a cup of coffee, $5. Okay, not a cheap place to go. So they're going to go there, but they're not going there to sell one film. They're probably selling 5, 10, 15 different films, and they're going to amortize that cost over all the films that they're selling. But if they're putting up that money, they may be taking out ads in the trade papers. The trade papers put out bumper editions around the different markets. These are the big, thick editions that have a lot of advertising. And the sales agent may be taking out a full-page ad. It may not be just for your film, but it may be for several of the new films that they're representing, and that costs money. And so there's a lot of expenses there, and if they're putting up a lot of money and they're giving you an advance or they're giving you a minimum guarantee, they're not going to want to enter into a very short deal because they want more time to recoup their investment. So those are marketing expenses. You put up the money to make the movie, you put up the money to produce it, but they're putting up a lot of the marketing money, and that's not an unreasonable thing for them to ask for. However, it needs to be tied to performance, in my opinion. So obviously, if they give you a big advance, then you're probably going to have to give them more years. But a lot of times, filmmakers are basically giving sales agents free inventory. They're not getting any advance or any minimum guarantee. It's basically free inventory. And the sales agent goes to the markets, and they're going to go to these markets anyway. And this is just what I call packaging fodder. It's films that are not the most desirable films, and they're just going to try to throw them into packages. So when the buyer comes in from Brazil and wants to buy a film, the sales agent says, great, I want to sell you the film. How about not only sell you that one film, but I'll sell you some other films too, and tries to give them some other films. And sometimes the films that are less desirable benefit by being included in a package deal. And there's issues that arise as to allocation of the package price if it's just one fee and it's to be allocated over the films, and whether it's going to be allocated fairly or not. But this is a common thing where packages of films are sold, and it's not necessarily always bad if it's done in a transparent and an honest manner. So the filmmaker can benefit from these package deals, but can also, lose out if their film is not given a fair price for the value of the film in the marketplace. At any rate, it's best to have a deal that's structured with milestones, so that the sales agent, has the rights for a certain number of years, a relatively modest number, and if they pay the filmmaker X number of dollars in that initial period, let's say it's 3 years, let's say they pay the filmmaker X number of dollars as the filmmaker's share of revenue in that 3 years, then they get an automatic extension for, let's say, another 3 years. And if at the end of that 3-year period, sales hit a certain performance threshold, then they get another extension. You give them a series of extensions. So in other words, their rights to the film are tied to them actively marketing it and paying the filmmaker. Because the truth is, if the distributor is actively selling your film, there's really no good reason to take it away from that distributor or find another distributor. First of all, it's going to be very difficult to find another distributor. Once you have a film that's been out in the marketplace, you know, selling it is like selling used food. You know, there's not a big market for it. You know, the buyers want the new films. They don't want the old films. And a film that's already gone through a couple of cycles of distribution is much less desirable, with some exceptions. If one of the actors in your film becomes very famous, then, you know, Brad Pitt, he was a nobody in this film when it first came out, and now he's famous, well, then maybe there'll be new life in that film. But generally speaking, over time, the value goes down. But if the distributor is paying you, reporting to you, and their term is tied to their performance, fine. And then if they don't meet the thresholds, then their rights expire, and you get back the rights, and you can look for a different distributor or do something else with the film. And you're not stuck in a situation where they have it for this really long period of time. So filmmakers have to protect themselves, because some sales agents, they acquire movies that they know are not going to make a lot of money, but it makes sense to them. Okay, if they can acquire a film, right, that they know is not going to make a lot of money, but it's going to help cover their overhead, okay, because they can put it in some package deals, and the deal is structured in a way that they get a distribution fee and they get reimbursement of their expenses. Let's say the film only does $100,000 in sales, right? But they get, you know, $20,000 as their commission, and then they get the other $80,000 as reimbursement of their expenses. You know, part of their going to Cannes, the 90 grand is split among the 10 films they represented at Cannes. Each, you know, pays a portion. And basically it all ends up in the sales agent, the international distributor's pockets. The filmmaker gets nothing, okay? So it may be beneficial, a film that performs in a rather mediocre fashion, it may be beneficial to the sales agent, because the sales agent says, hey, I'm going to these markets anyway, I'm incurring these expenses, and the more films I have to spread my expenses over, you know, the better.